made a film called The Life of Pancho Villa that premiered in New York in 1914. That film apparently has disappeared, although there's been a reconstruction of the film from other parts. All of this film gets deeply involved in a lot of myth and stories because one account is that all of the film spoiled because of heat and exposure and had to be reshot outside of Bakersfield with Mexican extras, which leads to the curious situation of Porfirian refugees to California, starring as Mexican revolutionaries in Bakersfield and being in a movie. I don't know what that means, but I think it's really fun. And we saw the image of the Banderas movie. In that movie, Banderas does not play Pancho Villa. He plays an important filmmaker, and it really talks about those episodes. Besides the film companies, excuse me, a number of actors also were traveling to California, got interested in the Mexican Revolution, got interested in Pancho Villa, and spent time across the border visiting with Pancho, and then living in California and telling stories about it. My favorite of these, whom I expect very few of you will recognize, was Tom Mix. Tom Mix was the first great cowboy movie star, well before Roy Rogers and Gene Autry rode off into the sunset. Tom Mix played cowboys, and he visited Villa and talked about it. A number of other foreigners took the train, stopped in El Paso, visited Pancho Villa, talked to him, and then wrote stories when they went home. Some of them even fought in a few battles. Of these, the most interesting were, in my opinion, Giuseppe Garibaldi, who actually fought in the battle for Ciudad Juarez in 1911 and claimed the sword of the Porfirian general who surrendered to him. Villa got it back, I can tell you that, but Giuseppe Garibaldi, and then went off to the Boxer Rebellion. And another very curious guy who appears to have been wanted for bank robbery in California, but he was known as Sam Draben, the Fighting Jew. His specialty was throwing dynamite. People were afraid of cannons because they exploded sometimes, so throwing dynamite was safer. And Sam was very successful at it. All of these kind of stories in the San Francisco newspaper, the LA newspaper, the San Antonio newspapers, New York newspapers, added to Villa's prestige. Villa recognized he had remarkable opportunities. He recognized he had these opportunities to become the leader of the revolution, partly because of vacancies, as someone once said, created by death. Vacancies created by death. The leader of the initial phase of the revolution, Francisco Madero, was about 2 years after about 2 years in the presidency, was arrested, forced to resign, and then murdered. Madero's associate in Chihuahua, who strongly supported Villa's activities, strongly supported Madero, was Abraham Gonzalez. And a month after Madero's death, Abraham Gonzalez was arrested by federal officials, forced to resign as governor, and murdered on the train trip to Mexico City. Villa appeared as the alternative to lead the revolution in the north, in the area of Chihuahua. And he took that position, and he took it with determination to fulfill the goals of the revolution. He always remained loyal to both Madero and Gonzalez. There's the people who were in the movie General Pancho Villa in 1914, and you'll see at the bottom, Villa played himself. And Raoul Walsh was one of the writers. There we go. Here's what we want to get to. This is, Villa got rid of the currency and replaced it in the areas that he occupied with what was called the dos caras, or dos caritas, this currency. And you'll see that on the thinner faced guy is Madero, if you don't recognize him. And the one with the fuller face is Abraham Gonzalez. And so he continued. All the time he was occupying areas to use money that recognized those two leaders whom he honored. He became a consummate revolutionary. So Villa had location, timing, and opportunity. He had determination to be successful as a revolutionary. And what made him especially important was he was approachable. Members of the national, that is the Mexican media, and the international media could speak to Villa. Other revolutionary leaders were not as approachable. Zapata was geographically isolated. It was hard to get to Morelia in some regards. Secondly, Carranza was personally remote. He just was not, he must not have had a happy life. He just was just not a very happy person, apparently. And Obregón was always busy. Obregón had a good sense of humor sometimes, but Obregón was always busy, and he was difficult to get in touch with for reporters, filmmakers, and people like that. No one, with the exception of Zapata in some regards, were as colorful as Villa as well. Villa had a biting sense of humor, and as one example, in an argument between Carranza and Villa, they were arguing by telegrams, sending telegrams back and forth to each other after the convention at Aguas Calientes in 1915. Villa said, well, this is a loose translation, well, what the hell, Carranza? Let's both commit suicide. It'll make everything better in the country. You go first. And there are many other jokes like that. Thank you. But I think the real key to Pancho Villa is that Pancho Villa had what I would call an everyday approach to revolution. What he talked about were things to make people's lives better on an everyday basis. So Carranza talked about high philosophical goals, diplomatic goals between the US and Mexico. Obregón talked about different kinds of economic relationships between the United States, Mexico, and other countries. Zapata talked about everybody becoming a farmer. Look around you here and think, would you want to be a part of that revolution? you were going to be a farmer. A lot of Mexicans in 1911 had left the farm and did not want to go back. So that wasn't very happy. On the other hand, Villa's revolution promised, and I think you talked about this really well, Villa's revolution promised the good life for everybody. What was the good life? Well, spending a lot of time with friends. And Villa's ideas of these agrarian colonies were military colonies where veterans would get together, undoubtedly play dominoes or cards, and enjoy being together. Or, we know Villa's other idea of the good life was the love of a good woman, or two, or three, or whatever, right? But I think the thing that really captivates Villa or captures Villa as a revolutionary is this. It's not a very clear picture, but it's ice cream. Absolutely ice cream. Sure, this is not a big deal for us today when you can go to the student union. But think about this. Ice cream was difficult to make. It required refrigeration. It required going to town. It was a luxury that people could really enjoy. And my guess is, I have no evidence for this other than historical intuition, that Villa has just finished having Tres Marias. That's chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry ice cream. And so he knew what really made things work. But Villa lost the Civil War against other revolutionaries, the Constitutionalists in 1916. Nevertheless, he remained popular in Mexico and the United States. But he lost to Obregon's army and to Felipe Angeles' strategies, especially in the Battle of Zacatecas. They didn't defeat Villa, or they didn't destroy Villa, but they forced him back into Chihuahua. That changed the situation, and President Woodrow Wilson offered a kind of half-hearted diplomatic recognition to Carranza, called something nobody understood, de facto recognition, a kind of tryout to see if Carranza could maintain order in Mexico and maintain security for foreigners in Mexico. Villa saw an opportunity here to demonstrate Carranza did not have control of the entire country. And that's the background for the Villa raid in Columbus, New Mexico territory. Villa's raid in Columbus, New Mexico territory demonstrated Carranza did not control the country. And as soon as the Villa raid was over, Pancho Villa became a revolutionary celebrity throughout Latin America, throughout the Caribbean, and throughout all of those places where people were tired of being pushed around by the United States. And so in that sense, he became a hero. And the United States sent General Patton to Pershing, sorry, not Patton, wrong war, General Pershing to track him down. Pershing spent 10 months unsuccessfully doing it, never found him. Wilson declared they had been a success and brought him home, and General Pershing and those troops shortly after went to Europe to fight in a world war. Villa was never defeated, personally defeated. Villa was never forced to do anything. He retired in 1920 by his own choice. And between 1920 and 1923, Villa worked on his hacienda and lived the good life that he had in mind. And then in 1923, he was assassinated on a trip home from Parral to his hacienda. In a sense, then he was a failure. The revolution was led by someone else, ultimately Obregón. He was assassinated. So how did he remain a world revolutionary celebrity? Well, three things that I want to conclude with are, first, he was celebrated in song, and we've talked about movies and newspapers and things like that, but he was celebrated in song. And you know how it is. Suddenly, a song will pop into your mind, and you can't get it out. And there it is forever, reminding you of something. Here's the attack on Columbus. Now, I don't know if this will play or not. Try. Oh, okay. It really doesn't matter if you can play this or not. Okay, but you all know this song, and this is Villa's song. This is Villa's marching song. And so I'd like you to sing a few bars with me. Christina, you will lead us. Okay, ándale.
Ya no puede caminar.
See, I knew we didn't have to have this play. We have people who know the words. So this was Villa's song, and it was circulated all over Mexico. How did that happen? Here's what happened. 1923, the year Villa was assassinated, the Ministry of Public Education began sending out small groups of instructors, not the teachers, the commissions that came later, but small groups of 3 to teach hygiene, cooking, and music. And the accounts I've seen by the music teachers say that they would go to rural communities in Puebla or wherever